Welcome to today's lesson, brought to you by Saved Learning. Today we're going to be looking at the characteristics of fiction and nonfiction. And before we get started, be sure to check out the description for a free graphic organizer so that you can take notes as you follow along. The characteristics of fiction and nonfiction can be broken down into four categories. First, we're going to look at features. Second, we're going to look at the perspective. Third, format, and finally, the purpose of writing. So first, we need to figure out how to remember what fiction and nonfiction stands for. And as we can see here, fiction is fake. It's made up. That's another way of thinking it. So one of the primary features is that it's going to be imaginary or made up. Fiction will also have characters, and those characters can be people or animals or even objects. You could have a talking chair, for instance, be a part of your story. There will also be a plot in fiction, and that plot will have a setting, a time and a place where the story takes place. There will be a conflict or a problem so that the characters have some sort of quest to go on, and that will eventually resolve itself. There will also be a theme or a lesson, some kind of takeaway from a work of fiction. Nonfiction, on the other hand, is true. And this is somewhat counterintuitive because it looks like it's not fake, right? So in other words, it's true. One of the primary features then is that it's based on real things. For example, real people, real events, or real or true ideas, maybe like a scientific idea. Therefore, it will have a lot of facts, and there will be some sort of organization to it. Right? The writer will organize their thoughts and ideas in such a way. There will also be a style, a mood, and a tone in the writing, and these are like the personality of the writing that the author includes. Moving on to the perspective of fiction, there can be two perspectives, either that from the narrator or from a character. And we can think of a narrator as someone outside of the story, just telling us what's going on, or it could be from an actual character in the story, giving us the events from his or her perspective. Nonfiction, on the other hand, comes from the perspective of the author, or in other words, the person who wrote that work. Next, we have the format of fiction, and there are many, many formats. We're just going to look at a few of them today. The two most popular formats are going to be short stories and novels. Novels are just long stories, but you could also have a fairy tale or a fable, for instance. Right? Comic books are popular forms of fiction. Nonfiction, on the other hand, could come in the format of a speech or an essay maybe that you have to write for class, news articles that are published daily about sports or medicine, or biographies when you read a story about a person, for instance. And lastly here, we have the purpose. Now, the primary purpose of fiction is just entertainment. We read made-up stories because we want to be entertained, but sometimes the purpose could be to change the reader's mind, and we've seen this throughout history. For example, when The Adventures of Huck Finn came out, was during a time of civil disobedience and just change, and in stories like this one were intended to change the hearts and minds of the people in America, to change their ways. Nonfiction, similarly, can have a purpose to entertain, right? We read nonfiction for entertainment, but we also read this to be informed, to get knowledge, to learn, or people also write nonfiction to persuade, right? Perhaps when you want someone to buy something, you see advertisements for things. This is to persuade your audience. So now we're going to go into a short quiz here. We have 4 questions that we're going to go over and see if we can't determine whether they are fiction or nonfiction. And our first example here is a story about a talking turtle that races a hare. Our first clue is a story, but this is not enough information to tell us whether it's fiction or nonfiction, because a story could be a made-up imaginary story, but it could also be a true story, a story about yesterday when I went to the grocery store. That would be a true story. But when we see that this one is about a talking turtle, animals don't talk, and he's going on this race against a hare, so there's a plot there with animals for characters. Therefore, we know it is fiction. Our next example here is an article about traveling to another country. And articles are going to be a pretty strong indicator that this is going to be nonfiction, and especially when we see that the information that we're getting is about traveling to another country. Perhaps we're searching on the internet about traveling. We're going to want real information, true information, and therefore this would be nonfiction. Our third example is a novel about an underwater sea adventure. And again, our first clue is a novel, and a novel is a format of fiction. And we see that it's about an adventure. Adventure typically implies that there's going to be some characters going on a quest and learning things and growing, and therefore it's going to be fictionary, just made up, make-believe. Our last example here is an essay about the benefits of daily exercise. So essay, again, our first clue here is going to hint to us that this is going to be nonfiction. And when we see it's about the benefits of daily exercise, we're going to hope that it's giving us real information, true information, maybe so that we can perhaps be persuaded to start exercising more. And therefore, that would be nonfiction. So that concludes our quiz. Thank you so much for watching. Again, this lesson was brought to you courtesy of Saved Learning.